Thanks to everyone who's coming in today. I think you're in for a really great session. We have with us right now Dr. John Potter, who's the clinical assistant professor in the Department of Dispute Resolution and Counseling, to talk to us about some of his experiences in working with non-traditional learners. This session is being recorded for later use, and as I said before, if you have any questions, please feel free to click on that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and ask away. Okay, John, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm looking forward to this. I'm a teaching professor, clinical professor, so I'm a 4-4 person, and teaching matters to me. My research career is over, and one of the problems, though, I ran into over time is my voice is getting weaker as I get older. And so 3 years ago or so, I went to Jessica Luntz, who's our assistant program director, and asked her if she could space out my classes a little bit to give me some recovery time. And she said, well, why don't you do a hybrid class? And I didn't know anything about that. So we started to work on hybrid, and we got a course approved. And then she said, well, you know, you should start working with Jennifer Culver, and because we're going to do more courses. And I said, great, where does she office? And she said, right upstairs. So I walked upstairs and met Jennifer, and since then we've worked together to develop hybrid classes. More than half of my class time today is in the hybrid format. So I thought I would talk with you a little bit about what I've learned, what I wish I would have done differently, and why I think this effort that we're putting into hybrid is so worthwhile. So let me describe a little bit about a typical class for me. So I teach in the master's program in dispute resolution and conflict management. We're part of the Simmons School. I'm an associate professor there and a teaching professor. So my typical classroom will have 10 to 15 students in it. The age range goes from 25 to 70. So I have all three generations. I have Gen Xers, I have baby boomers, I have millennials. A third of the class will speak at least 2 languages, sometimes 3. About 20% of the class will have family in another country. A lot of our students are working. Many of our students are single parents. I could go on and on. We have a remarkably diverse population of students. Now, for some people, they would consider that to be a challenge. For me, I think it's an awesome opportunity to try to find a way to identify how a student learns. And with that, I wrote down 10 little things I thought we would talk about. Here's the first one. From my point of view, having taught at the university level, graduate and postgraduate level since 1976, hybrid's the future. This gives an institution an opportunity to meet students where they are. And as the population becomes broader, as the classroom becomes more diverse, and so on and so forth, reaching students in a way that's meaningful to them is paramount. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that idea first and foremost. So my original idea was I would do some videos. So in negotiation, as an example, we used a classic negotiation book. So a student of ours who works in the Lyle School, they have a distance laboratory, and he allowed me to use one of those laboratories to record videos. So in the beginning, I did the classic classroom instructor thing. I used a PowerPoint. And I realized after about 2 or 3 attempts at 1-hour segments on chapters, that was a really bad idea. Now, I use PowerPoints, don't get me wrong. They're in files on Canvas. There are some students who use PowerPoint as an outline. But more importantly, what I realized was you can't take the classroom and import it into distance learning or remote learning or a hybrid program. It's a different way of interacting with people. So my typical video now is about an hour, and I don't use PowerPoints. I don't have any fancy whiteboards or high technology at all. In fact, I'll have the overhead camera and a piece of paper in front of me, and I'll just use markers. just as if the student and I were sitting across from one another at Starbucks. So it's much more relational in that way. And every now and then, if I make a mistake, I'll just exit out and move ahead. Or sometimes I'll even deliberately make a mistake so it humanizes the interaction with the student more. Not only that, I had this idea, typical college professor, that the instruction was all about me, right? And that students were going to watch the video. It turns out the modern student in the classroom that I'm in doesn't do that. Remember, I told you many of our students are working. So what do? They listen to it in their car on their commute. So I Googled the average commute time in Dallas, and it turns out to be a little less than a half an hour. So think of it this way. The student takes their smartphone, listens to half of the chapter on the way to work, listens to the other half on the way back, or for students with a longer commute, they listen to the whole thing once or maybe twice. So now, right now, students listen to the video more than they actually watch the video. And for students who have a different background, they get the opportunity to listen to that content anytime they want to. And often what students tell me is they'll find a certain place where they want to look at something in the material a little more closely. So they'll listen to that part in the video. They'll print out maybe those pages from the PowerPoint or look at it on their computer. Then they'll match it to the book. And all of that, of course, matches to the assignments. So think of it as climbing up a ladder. Each step that you go up, you get closer to the top. And each of these little pieces are steps on the ladder. So for me, this is the future. And I intend to do as many courses as I can online, as long as it's appropriate for the content and for the students. I talked a little bit about not taking the classroom online and trying to create a different way of thinking in a hybrid program. So I want to tell you a story about a student who was in his 70s when he started the program. I just want you to think about this. He's not been in a college classroom since he was 21 or so. So that's what, 50 years? So he didn't know where to park his car. He couldn't find the classroom. I mean, I could go on and on and on. When you're that age and you come back to a college campus, it's a big puzzle. And in the very first class, he asked about whether or not he should have a computer. Now, no undergraduate would ask a question like that, right? But he did because he didn't know the difference. Then he wanted to know which one he should get. So I said, let's do this. We'll go to the Starbucks at Fondren on the break, and whatever all the undergraduates are using, that's what you'll get. How about that? And I already knew the answer because every college professor knows it's a MacBook, right? But I wanted him to discover it on his own. So we did that, and he decided he was going to buy a MacBook. And lo and behold, the next week he shows up and he's got a MacBook, which he does not know how to use. He has an old Dell computer, Microsoft, Dell computer. Right? And so I thought, okay, great. I don't have the time to do MacBook teaching, right? But here's the beauty of the hybrid format. And here's the beauty of creating an open space for students to interact with one another, either online or face-to-face. Two students who were in their 20s promised him they would help him. So we took a break, and they helped him get his computer up and running, and so on and so forth. And just to show you how beautiful this kind of interaction can be, they did some things online together. And then the next week, I went over to the bookstore and got him one of those SMU MacBook covers with the, Peruna on it. We gave it to him as a class, and it broke the ice. So now he went from being over here to being right here. And it was absolutely beautiful. And I have story after story after story about that kind of thing. However, the hybrid format's not easy in the beginning. And any of us who have struggled with going from the classroom to online this semester know what that experience is like. It's not as easy as it looks, and you need you need a qualified partner. You need someone to work with, and Jennifer's been that person with me, and I hope I've been helpful to her as well. But the idea here is you experiment once, see where the strengths and weaknesses are, you come back and improve it. And generally, at least for me, it takes 2 or 3 times for classes for me to get it in the right place, where I'm pretty close to where it needs to be. Otherwise, I'm guessing, which has always been a bit of a challenge for me. Unfortunately, I like to be right if I can, right? And so I struggle with the mishaps. So I thought I would talk a little bit about mishaps. You wouldn't think this would be true, what I'm going to tell you, and this is true across the generations. It doesn't matter if the student is a millennial born between 1980 and 2000. Doesn't matter if they're a Gen Xer born between 1960 and 1980. Doesn't matter if they're a baby boomer born between 1940 and 1960. It doesn't matter where they grew up. Doesn't matter what the first language they learned was. It doesn't matter if they have a MacBook or a Dell. None of that matters. If there's a glitch, if there's a bump in the process, everything comes apart and people just freeze. They don't even send me an email or call me. The only way I find out is in the classroom. And I still haven't reconciled that. For the life of me, I can't understand why that's such a big deal. And so what I've done lately is Jennifer comes to class in the first class and spends about 15 minutes navigating the basics of Canvas, talking a bit about the hybrid, and encouraging students to make contact if they have a problem. Now, just for fun, our son is an engineer, software engineer at Twitch. And for younger people, Twitch is a really big deal. It's a video gaming platform. They live and die on speed to access the site. And for them, they have the same problem that I just outlined. If someone perceives it takes too long to access the information they're seeking on Twitch, they just check out, which is amazing, right? They took all the time to sign on, but that extra 3 seconds, they leave. And the same thing here online in a hybrid format. Students who are patient in the classroom when the room's too hot or too cold, when it comes to online, if something doesn't come up immediately, or God forbid, the answer to a question doesn't match the question as it was asked, and they found it in the book and they found the right answer, and I was wrong or made a mistake or got lost in transmission or something like that, it's a crime against humanity, right? And so what happens is in the classroom, I always have like this 15-minute conversation about how online hybrid is not perfect. It's really good, it's great, but it's not perfect. And gradually over time, I think I'm making some progress there. But I can tell you a glitch, it turns out to really be a big deal. So I thought I would talk a little bit about how the hybrid format creates a new way of learning. So I'll tell you 2 or 3 stories about student successes using the hybrid format that I hope will be some encouragement to you. I had a young woman in class who didn't actively participate in class. She was quiet. She would only talk to 1 or 2 of her classmates. And this spring, we had a course in generational conflict. And we created a project outside the classroom. I want you to think about this, outside the classroom, right? So we've got students who are interacting with people. And so we made a presentation to what we perceived our client, and a really nice PowerPoint, right? This is a good use of PowerPoint. And so she took on 1 entire segment by herself. And I thought, oh gosh, I don't know her very well. What's going to happen if it doesn't turn out well? And it's just the opposite. She killed it. and it was wonderful. And she sent me a text message, which I took a picture of and I'll keep for the rest of my life. And what it says is this was the best college course she had ever taken. It was her last course in the certificate program. And the point here is, if I've got 6 or 7 different ways for someone to learn right in front of them, one of them is likely to strike a chord. And if I can find that, then I can leverage that. I can make that work for me and work for the student. So there's one example. Let me give you another example. I have a student in negotiation about a year ago who really struggled with the exercises. So in negotiation, it's a practical course. There's classroom work, book work. Then there's also exercises. You buy a car, buy a house, solve world peace, those kinds of exercises. Each one of them has a particular point. Now, because of COVID, we had to do the exercise part on Zoom, right? So we did an exercise where the student had to call a classmate and negotiate over the phone. And we talked a little bit about how that's different than the classroom. There are all sorts of classic ways to describe that, but that part was pretty straightforward. However, in the debrief, this student spoke up and said this was the first time that she felt like she understood negotiation. And the only difference was the talking on the phone part, the lack of the face-to-face. That was the only difference. Right? And so that gave her a springboard then to interact in a different way in the next exercise. It gave her a great start, if that makes sense. And so by the time the class was over, she was interacting face-to-face in the exercises just like everybody else was. But if I didn't have that opportunity for her to open the door the way she needed to open the door, she wouldn't have gotten in the room. I hope that makes some sense. And that leads me to
It does. And Don, we do have one question. Do you set up all the learning approaches in advance for each thing that they learn?
Yes. Yeah. To the extent that I'm able, I try to make the plan work. If it doesn't, and I've had this happen where I've gone to Jennifer and said, I thought I was going the right way. This isn't working. And we'll make an adjustment. But it doesn't look like hybrid's necessarily so well planned. But I got to tell you, it's really well planned. And it's very connected. So yeah, no, planning ahead. In fact, hybrid's a lot harder than most people think that it is, but it's also much more rewarding. There's much more. And now that I've taught negotiation 4, 5, 6 times now, hybrid format, I feel like I've got a lot more flexibility. There's some more things I can do to even make the experience better, but it takes a little bit of time to get there.
And with that learning approach, John, I think just as a follow-up kind of question, how do you kind of intentionally structure what they do when they're not live with you, so that when they're live with you, they are really doing these kinds of practices and other things you want them to be doing?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I annoy the hell out of them, right? So I'll send, let me use negotiation as an example since I've talked about that class. We use a small book that's got little essays in it about negotiation. And so I'll send an announcement and I'll tell the student how long it's going to take to read the announcement, how long it's going to take to read that piece in the book, and what did you think about this? Did you see this? Did you see this in the New York Times today? Did you see this in the Dallas Morning News? It matches what we're learning in class. Now, I try not to do it like to where I'm obnoxious, but I always have in my mind that I want the student to know that I'm present in their life. That's my yardstick. And so I do a lot of that. Or if there's some really interesting negotiation, I'll talk about that in an announcement. But yeah, I want them to always know that I'm around. but I don't want to be mean-spirited or obnoxious about it. So did I answer your question? Is that what you were looking for? Yeah. So that leads me to a really important point. I talked about how I think hybrid's the future and why. And I mean, I have to tell you, the last 3 years of teaching have been the best 3 years of my whole teaching life because of all the creativity and the new learnings. But there's one really basic cornerstone concept that I hope I don't ever forget, and that is that relationships are more important than programs. So I want a student to find a way, if they want to talk to me, to be able to do that. So I don't care if we Zoom, I don't care if we FaceTime, I don't care if we talk on the phone, I don't care if we meet face to face. I want to make sure they have the opportunity to connect with me. So one of the things I've learned for my next hybrid class is I'm actually going to set up one-on-one Zoom time or phone time with students. Because what I have found is, when you make yourself that open to students, often it makes them uncomfortable because they can only think of the classroom format, where the only time they go to the professor is to complain about the assignment or the grade or argue about a test question. And that's not what I want. What I want is for them to get to know me a little bit and for me to get to know them a little bit so I can make their experience richer. And
right. Yeah, and on that point, John, because this question is perfect for right here. As you're keeping yourself open and showing them all the ways that they can reach out to you, how do you also set some early boundaries so that they don't feel that you're actually available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
Yeah, so I tell them that. I tell them if we're going to have a meaningful relationship, it's based on respect. It's based on respect for my time. It's based on respect for your time. If you call me on the phone and I'm doing something else, or you call me at 2 in the morning to tell me the assignment's too hard, we'll have a different conversation. But I establish the boundary right in the beginning, and I do it from a very human point of view. In hybrid, it's really uncomfortable to dump rules, written rules, on students. It's a lot better to be vulnerable enough for them to see you human, but also with having these personal boundaries. But frankly, I've never had a problem. I've never had a student call me at midnight. I've never had a student call me because, you know, their dog died or their wife left them or their boyfriend left them or any of that. I've had only meaningful phone calls with students, but I think it's just a different way of interacting with students is the best way I can talk about it. That's the idea. So here's another idea that I thought we would talk a little bit about, and I want to make sure I leave some time for questions, but I also want to make sure I get to tell you some stories, maybe to provoke your thinking about hybrid and perhaps even taking the risk to doing hybrid. Here's a really important idea that I struggle with now. Class time and remote time are not the same. In mediation, we did an entire day of mediation exercises on Zoom. And a colleague of mine led that class and I helped him. And other faculty, pitched in to help and moderate some mediation exercises and to support him. However, what he did was what everybody does. You take the classroom and you put it online. And you do it even to the point of time. You put the same time online. And I can just tell you, Zoom fatigue's a real thing. And after a while, the time becomes non-productive. It isn't because the instructor doesn't have the right idea. It's not because the people who are helping don't have the right idea. It's not because the book's not good. It's because it's Zoom. And there are all kinds of research papers about this, about why it's different. And so to equate minute for minute, hour for hour classroom to online is not going to work. It just can't. So for me, as an example, we use the avatar at Simmons That's Stacy Straunch who does that, and she's awesome. And so her rubric goes something like this: a half hour of avatar time is an hour in the classroom. And that's absolutely right. So what I'm struggling with now, the thing I'm working on now, besides the person-to-person part of this that I need to work on, is this idea of how I can mix the work so that the time is well spent. So that, as an example, if we spend a half hour on Zoom, I think of that in my head as an hour of classroom time. So I want to create some space on Zoom for the students to do something different, not looking at me and looking at their classmates, which is pretty weird after about 45 minutes, right? And so I'll create some space. I'll say, go do this, or go look up this, and come back in 15 minutes or whatever. Same thing in research methods. I'll have the students read a portion of a paper, and they'll do that off of Zoom. I'll leave Zoom up running, but I'll have them, get up and go away and do that in the other room. And so for me, finding this mix of face-to-face and classroom and do this and don't do that, finding that mix is what I'm working on. And I hope I'll get there. I feel like I'm going in the right direction, but I'm always mystified at what works and what doesn't work. Let me see if I can give you another example about class time. Oh, here's one of my favorites. So if you teach non-traditional students, if that student's a single parent, getting to class on time is a big deal. I mean, like a gigantic, enormous big deal. I have students who park in the parking lot at SMU and use the Wi-Fi because they can't afford it at home, right? So it's very different. So for me, let's say a student is late for a Zoom classroom, or students even late in the classroom. Now, the traditional way to do this would be to dock them 6 points on their final grade, right? That's the classic kind of classroom way of thinking. But I don't think that way. So what I do is I say, which of you in the classroom is going to talk to this student at the break and bring them up to speed for what they missed? In other words, your job is to teach and help and support your classmates. And anymore, students don't have to explain why they're late. Once their classmates know them and know they're a single parent, or they work in Fort Worth, or they have 2 jobs and their second job kept them later, those kinds of things, not only do they create space for that to happen, but they support the student. And so by the time the class is done, like in generational conflict, this is an awesome example. We had students from age 66 to 22. We had Black students, we had Latino students, we had students from other countries, we had an interesting mix of people. And so you would think that in the face-to-face classroom, this would create these opportunities for relationships. However, I don't know if you've ever noticed this or not, but more often than not, what happens is students in class sit with students who are like them, and they don't move. So they will sit in the same seat, in the same class every time with people who are like them, yeah? Now, you can be really clever and come up with seating charts and all that kind of stuff, but I've realized doing hybrid classes is a better way to do it, is to get them to do something together. And so what happened is, it turns out there's a student, the oldest student in class, and one of the youngest students in class worked on this project together. They were forced, just, the way it was assigned. And they've become awesome friends. And I don't think that would have happened in a face-to-face classroom for the reason I just described, unless I manufactured it. And I'm not very good at manufacturing relationships, but if I can create a project or something for them to do, I'll let them create the relationship. that's a bit easier on me. So like we talked about earlier, some things about hybrid are harder, some things are easier. And one of the things that's really easy to do is to create something for the students to do and let them get to know each other. And that's worked out really well. Was that a question? You're muted.
What do you have for interactive feedback necessary to assist our international graduate students with their lecturing, presentation skills, pronunciation, and other oral English communication skills? Outside of synchronous classes, I already do extensive individual and small group consultations at mutual convenience with students, often at out hours since they are located in various countries.
Yeah. So could you repeat that question?
Sure. What suggestions do you have for interactive feedback necessary to assist our international graduate students with their lecturing or presentation skills, pronunciation, and other oral English communication skills?
So I think the idea is the graduate students teaching elsewhere. Is that the idea?
Or maybe they're a TA, possibly.
Oh, TA.
Possibly, or just their overall presentation skills, or as you're helping them with negotiation.
So I've not done that. We don't have teaching associates in our program. We don't have postdocs in our program. I think, here's what I have done though, and this may be helpful. We have students who do some of the negotiation exercises really well. Like we had a student in class who ran a car dealership for a while. So the exercise in buying a car, big surprise, he did that really well. Then we have students who have different life experiences, and one exercise they do extremely well. And so I'll ask them sometimes if they want to come start the exercise. And they love doing that, right? They love coming, talking about the exercise and introducing it. But what I've taken recently to doing is saying, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you'll come do this, then we'll do this exercise together. Let me show you how to do it. And then we can debrief and talk about it afterwards. So I think if you have teaching associates that struggle with a particular aspect of teaching, and you have all this experience, you just walk alongside them. Just say, let's do this together. And this gives you an opportunity to learn a little bit more about them and vice versa. And that probably takes a little bit more time. But I think that's how I would do it if I were in a similar position as the questioner was in.
And our questioner said, yes, these are in particular TAs and grad students all over the department, and they're taking some of the advanced ESL courses.
Yeah, so that's just not my area, but I think I would do it. I know this is really going to sound crazy. Universities are very medieval, right? There are different ranks, and some people are knights and some people are, whatever, and so on and so forth. What I've found is as time goes on, the more vulnerable I am, the less autocratic I am, the more engagement I have, and the more engagement leads to more creativity. And then I can leverage, this is really crazy. I don't think I've ever had a student ask me how long I've been teaching. I don't think anyone's ever asked that. But I've been doing this for 50 years or so, something like that, 45 years. I mean, I have some experience I can bring to education. But I've learned in the past 3 years in particular, I can't do it the old way. I've got to do it in a more relational way. Remember, relationships are more important than programs.
We've gotten a lot of interest from your comments about how you're using the avatars. If you could talk a little bit more about some of the things you've done with them.
Oh, it's crazy. It's awesome. So we have this laboratory, and we take a basic mediation exercise, one that's been done in a lot of programs because it's a classic. And so we work with the avatar. We work with Stacy, and she knows the role pretty well. And so she is an actor for both parties in the mediation, and the student is the mediator. And so the student starts off with the mediator's opening statement and so on and so forth, follows, this path that we have for the kind of mediation we principally teach, which is facilitating. And then the avatar interacts with the student. And well, first of all, the avatar is really good at avataring. Did I say that the right way? Yeah. She's really good at that. And it makes it, and the students, they have to decide whether or not they're going to stay with it, right? Because she's really good at it. And so then all the students are in the classroom together. Everybody has a turn. It doesn't last particularly long. Again, you can't wear people out. And then if we need to stop, we'll say stop avatar, because it happens. Sometimes a student can't even talk because they get confused. All kinds of things happen. And then we just revisit and start avatar again. And because she's done this exercise a few times, it gets better and better each time we do it. And then in the beginning, this is the old me thinking, right? In the beginning, I used to think, oh my gosh, the student, is in a panic, can't go on. This is gonna be like the worst experience they've ever had in education. But every single time, the number one comment in mediation is they loved doing the avatar. And I think it goes back to this experiential learning idea that we talked about early on, giving people different ways to interact with the material and what we're trying to talk about. And it just works. And I mean, there's probably some super smart person in the Simmons School with multiple degrees who can explain this to me in an academic format, right? But all I know is it works. And it's fun for Stacy. It's fun for us and the students. And the students always want to know who the avatar is, whether it's a real person or not. And I'm not going to disclose that, but I think y'all have figured it out. But anyway, yeah, absolutely. And I think it gets to this idea that instead of having one PowerPoint slide on the screen and just talking about it for 45 minutes, for me, those days are gone. I'll think of 10 different ways to come at the material if I can do it. I hope
and I'll just say I completely agree. The students very, very quickly forget that that's an avatar that they're talking to, because she is so good at working in them with the different voices and with everything else that all of that just fades away, and they immediately engage in the topic at hand and they get to work. And it is really fun to watch. We've got about 8 minutes left. If there are any other questions that people would like to ask, or final thoughts that you'd like to leave folks with. You're talking about the avatars, I think, is a big hit. We've got a lot of interest about that one.
Oh, yeah, so maybe we could do something seminar-ish with the avatar, but
it would be fun.
Because again, our program's experiential, it's interactive, right? And so for us, the avatar has been a real blessing. I mean, it's been here's one more idea I'm going to talk about, if it's okay. And I'm always looking to try to find a way to do this better. I want to be a good teacher. So I've taken this idea of doing a community project in every class, so that we take what's in the classroom and we do something to serve the community. Next term, we're going to do something with a drug rehab program down by Fair Park out in the barrio. Those kinds of things. Get students, instead of talking to one another in the classroom and the same people every week, get them something to do outside the classroom together. If I can do that, I think I'll even make hybrid courses that much better. But I think the caveat here is you have to give yourself a little time to do it once or twice to, make sure you feel good about it and you're going about it the right way. I come up with all kinds of crazy ideas that I run past Jennifer, and some of them stick and some of them, go immediately in the trash. But eventually, some of them will be good enough that they'll move the teaching forward. But I love doing hybrid. I'll do it for the rest of my teaching career.
How would you interpret some of the things that you've done with this hybrid course for a different kind of course, such as an art studio class?
Yikes. I have no idea. An art studio, you mean like actually making something, creating something in a classroom?
Mm-hmm.
So I tell you what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't make it too formal. Like, let's say, there used to be this guy on public radio. They used to teach people how to paint. I remember it's old.
Bob Ross.
That guy, yeah. And it was super formal, and the lights were just right, and the easel was always in the right place, and the paints were always in the right place. And he never got paint on himself. And, you know, I don't think that's the way to go about it. I think there might be multiple camera angles, and I'd make some mistakes. You know, I'd drop something on the floor. I'd make it like we were together, and it was a one-on-one tutorial, if I could do it that way. I work with a lot of people who want to whiteboard on Zoom and do all kinds of complicated things. I don't know why that is. I don't know why we do that. But for me, just the more it's like the student and me talking one-on-one together, the more effective my time is. I did 8 hours of video for a charity on conflict resolution, and I've done enough of these videos now. I did it in one take, all 8 hours, 8 one-hour segments, and I did it just the same way. And so, you know, I provided the material to this charity, and everyone that used it said the same things the students say, and that is, it was really comfortable. It wasn't too formal. And so when I get that kind of feedback from both students and people who are not students, I think that for me, this is the best way for me to do it.
And in talking about videos, I think we have time for this one last question. Do you have students create videos? And if you do you teach them how they can create videos in a more effective and professional kind of way?
I haven't done that, but that's an awesome idea. Yeah, you know, I could, in fact, thank you. That's a great idea. I would love to do that. Yeah. And the course to do that in is I teach research methods. I have a big research background, so I love that kind of stuff. And that would be perfect. Have them do an instructional video on some aspect of research methods. So whoever said that, I'll get you a Starbucks card. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful to SMU and grateful to Jennifer, all the great people that I work with, and all the opportunities to create these kinds of things. I just hope that some of what we've talked about has been either an encouragement to you or helpful to you in some way. And you can find me on the internet if you want to ask a question, or you can, you know, come over to our building and go to the 3rd floor and ask Jennifer. Any other questions?
We have, do you have any ideas or hints for larger classrooms?
Oh, I do. I did a program for 1,300 refractive surgeons last week, eye surgeons. And of course it's, you know, WebEx type format, and I can't see the people. So what I think about is I imagine that they're all in this room. And so in my mind, I go all the way to the far left corner and talk to that person. I go all the way to the far right corner and talk to that person. Closer to the right, closer to the left, right in the middle. I do that mentally. I just think that they're all in this room together. And then that allows my mind to go to different places and not stay in the same place. I think one of the downsides that happens for me in Zoom is I keep looking at the screen because I don't want the student to think I'm not looking at them. And really all it does is focus me so much on the screen. I'm not holistic enough, if that makes sense. That's how I would do it. I would just think about big room. In my mind, I talk to people in the room. That's the way I would do it.
That's great, and we are kind of right at our cutoff time, so that was perfect. I'd like to thank Dr. Potter again for his time today and for his insights about working in a hybrid format and working with non-traditional students. And I'd like to thank everybody that's here today and asked such great questions. We have this one recorded, and we have several more recorded from yesterday and today that we'll be able to share with you when these sessions are over, and hopefully we'll see you in some later ones to come. Thanks again.
Thank you.